Priscilla Presley thought she had heard every recording Elvis ever left behind. But in the winter of 1997, while sorting old boxes in a quiet Memphis storage room, she pressed play on a dusty answering machine, and Elvis's forgotten voice filled the room. What he said next shattered her completely. If stories about hidden truth and humanity behind legends resonate with you, stay with this one, because what Priscilla found changed how the world remembers Elvis. Memphis was cold that winter, not the kind of cold that comes with snow, but the kind that seeps into old buildings and waits in the corners. The small storage facility on Union Avenue hummed with a low fluorescent buzz as Priscilla signed her name on a clipboard. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes named Marla Henderson, slid the key across the counter. Priscilla thanked her with a small smile and walked down the narrow concrete hallway. Each step echoed. Each metal door looked the same, only the numbers changing. Have you ever stepped into a place that felt like it was holding a piece of your life hostage? Her unit was near the end. She paused for a moment, hand resting on the cold lock, wondering why this visit felt heavier than the others. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the date. Inside, the air smelled like cardboard, dust, and something faintly electric. Stacked against the wall were old crates, garment bags, and taped-up cartons with fading black marker. Costumes, tour photos, paperwork. She had come to make sense of everything, to tidy up the loose ends of an estate that still felt like a living person. One box sat apart from the rest, shoved into a corner as if someone had tried to forget it on purpose. The writing on the side was simple, rushed. Phone, 1976 to 77. The sight of it made her chest tighten. Those were hard years. The late-night calls, the missed calls, the unreturned messages. She knelt down, the concrete biting through her jeans, and pulled the box closer. The tape peeled away with a dry rip. Inside, under a layer of yellowed packing paper, she saw it. A beige plastic answering machine, the kind that looked more like a small brick than a piece of technology, with a curled phone cord still wrapped around it. For a moment, she just stared at it. How many times had Elvis called this machine? How many words had been trapped inside it, waiting for someone to listen? What would you do if you found a piece of your past that might hurt you, but might also heal you? There was an outlet on the wall, half hidden behind a crate. Slowly, almost against her own will, Priscilla carried the machine over and plugged it in. The old motor inside woke up with a soft mechanical whir. A red power light flickered, then settled into a steady glow. She pressed one button, then another, fingers remembering the rhythm even after all these years. The small digital display struggled, lines appearing and disappearing, until finally it showed a single number. One message, just one. Her heart began to pound in her chest, loud enough that she could hear it in her ears. She wiped dust from the tiny screen and leaned closer. On the display, a tiny date code blinked weakly, as if the numbers themselves were afraid to be seen. It was from August 1977, just days before everything changed. Priscilla stared at the digits, her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. Why had no one told her about this machine? Why had this one message survived when so many other things had been lost, thrown out, or sold? Her thumb hovered over the play button. The room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in. The hum of the lights faded. All she could hear was the faint tick of the machine and the rush of her own heartbeat. She knew that whatever waited on that tape could not be unheard. And once she pressed that button, her memory of Elvis would never be the same again. The room felt colder the moment Priscilla pressed play. A soft click sounded inside the machine, followed by a long breath of static. It was the kind of tape hiss she remembered from the 1970s, thin, shaky, filled with tiny cracks of electricity. The sound alone was enough to pull her backward in time. Then, without warning, a voice slipped through the speakers. Warm, familiar, and heartbreakingly alive. "Scylla, it's me." Her hand flew to her mouth. For a moment she thought the machine had made a mistake, or maybe she was imagining it. But no, there it was again. Elvis's voice. Not the stage voice millions knew. Not the polished interview voice. This was the private one. The tired one. The one he used at 2 a.m. when the world felt heavy. Priscilla's knees trembled. It had been 20 years since she'd heard him sound like that. 20 years since August 1977, when everything stopped. Have you ever heard a voice from your past that felt like someone opening a locked door inside your heart? The tape crackled again. I don't even know if you'll get this. Or if this thing is even working. There was a pause, and she could almost picture him rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was nervous. A soft breath. Then another. I tried calling earlier, but I couldn't say what I needed to say. His words trembled at the edges. Priscilla could hear something beneath them. A heaviness she remembered too well. The late nights. The long tours. The exhaustion he hid behind smiles. People saw Elvis Presley, the superstar. She saw the man who sometimes struggled to take a deep breath after a show. The man who always kept too much inside. The tape continued. I know I ain't been myself. You've probably heard things. Maybe you're tired of hearing him. I don't blame you. Static swallowed the next few seconds. Priscilla leaned closer, afraid to miss even a single syllable. A weak hum filled the room, almost like the tape was sighing. Then his voice returned, softer now. I'm sorry, Scylla. I'm real sorry. Her eyes burned. She remembered the last real conversation they'd had. The one where he joked his way around the truth, avoided telling her how much the pressure was wearing him down. Elvis always hid the worst parts of himself from the people he loved. Why? Pride? Fear? Or something deeper? Something he never learned how to express? The tape fluttered again. I've been thinking a lot lately, about things I never said. Things I should have said. His voice sounded as if it were drifting in and out of a memory. A hotel room lamp buzzing beside him. A phone in his hand. A silence he didn't know how to break. Priscilla felt her breath slowing to match the rhythm of the tape. She could hear the strain in his lungs. The kind of strain he used to hide during concerts. She remembered a backstage moment at the Las Vegas Hilton. August 1976. When he gripped the edge of a speaker, catching his breath while the crowd of 18,400 kept cheering without knowing anything was wrong. How much had he hidden from her? Elvis's voice softened. There's something I gotta tell you. Her heart dropped. Short sentence. Heavy sentence. A sentence that pulled the entire room into silence. What truths do people bury until it's too late? She wondered. And what happens when those truths finally come out? The tape hissed again. Louder this time. Like it was struggling to hold onto the last pieces of his message. Elvis inhaled sharply. Then he spoke with a trembling honesty she had never heard from him before. I should have said this sooner. The sentence cut off. The machine clicked faintly. The tape rolled on. Priscilla held her breath. She could feel it. Something was coming. Something he had carried alone. Something that could change everything she thought she knew. And then, the room went completely still. The tape wavered, as if unsure whether it should reveal the next part. Then Elvis's voice settled into a low, steady tone. It was the voice of a man carrying something too heavy for his own hands. You remember that night? After the Hilton show? Priscilla closed her eyes. She didn't need him to say which night. She knew. Las Vegas Hilton, August 18, 1976. Crowd estimate. 18,400. A sold-out arena glowing with gold lights and roaring energy. People waving scarves. Fans crying as he walked on stage. A night that looked perfect from the outside. But backstage, it had been different. Elvis continued speaking, his voice rough around the edges. That night, I told everybody I was tired. Told them I just needed a minute. But that ain't the truth. Priscilla felt her pulse quicken. The air in the storage room seemed to thicken, as if it remembered that night too. A faint rustle came through the speaker. Maybe he was shifting in a chair, maybe pacing. She could almost picture him in that hotel room, sitting at the edge of the bed, phone on the nightstand, the glow of a single lamp casting shadows across his face. And she remembered him leaving early, slipping out of the after-party without saying much. Red West had covered for him, telling people the king was exhausted. But Priscilla had always sensed something darker. Elvis spoke again. I wasn't tired, Scylla. I was scared. The words hit her like a gust of cold air. Elvis Presley, scared? The man who walked on stage as if he owned the world. The man fans compared to a force of nature? I didn't want you seeing me like that, he added. Didn't want you seeing how bad things were getting. His breathing grew uneven, and for a moment the tape sounded like it might fall apart under the weight of what he was trying to say. I thought if I pushed people away, maybe they wouldn't notice something was wrong. Short sentence. Sharp sting. Priscilla remembered that night after the show. She had seen the way he leaned against the hallway wall, pretending to look at a poster just so he wouldn't have to stand without support. She remembered the distant look in his eyes, something fragile hidden behind the charm he used like armor. Why didn't he tell her then? Why didn't he tell anyone? The tape crackled again, and Elvis's voice returned. Soft, quiet, almost breaking. I'm sorry I pushed you away that night. Priscilla felt her throat tighten. She wrapped her arms around herself as if bracing for a storm. Hearing him say those words now, after decades of unanswered questions, felt like finding a missing page in a story she thought was finished. I thought if I kept you at a distance, I could protect you. But all I did was hurt you. A long silence followed. Not an empty one, a heavy, meaningful one. The kind that only comes when someone is finally admitting the truth. Priscilla whispered into the room, though he couldn't hear her. I would have stayed. I would have helped you. The tape hummed almost like it understood. Have you ever looked back at a moment and realized it meant more than you understood at the time? Would you have acted differently if you knew the truth behind someone's silence? Elvis's voice shook slightly as he continued. I didn't know how to ask for help. Not then. Not after everything. When people look at you like you're made of magic, you start pretending you are. He let out a breath. A tired, painful breath. And maybe that was my mistake. Priscilla pressed her fingertips to her lips, holding back the emotion rising inside her. She could almost feel the weight Elvis carried during those final months. The pressure, the expectations, the exhaustion he could never escape. Then the tape shifted. The sound changed. Elvis inhaled slowly, preparing himself. But that's not the real reason I called. The storage room went silent. Utterly silent. A new truth was about to begin. The tape wavered again, and for a moment Priscilla thought it might stop. The static thickened, rising and falling like someone breathing right beside her. Then Elvis's voice slid back in. Quieter now, almost hesitant, as if he was choosing every word with care. I gotta tell you something, Scylla. Something I never said out loud. Priscilla's fingers curled into her palms. Her heart thudded once. Hard. There was a different weight in his voice now. Deeper, shakier, the kind of truth a person releases only when they have run out of places to hide. Elvis inhaled sharply on the tape. She could hear the tiny tremble in that breath. She had heard that sound before. In dressing rooms when he thought no one was listening. In the quiet moments after shows when the crowd's roar faded and he was left alone with himself. I've been feeling things get out of my control, he said. More than anyone knows. Priscilla's eyes burned. That single sentence cracked something inside her. She leaned closer, as if her proximity could somehow steady him through the years. I know people talk, he continued. They say I'm still unstoppable. Still the king. Still larger than life. Another pause, then a soft, pained laugh. But I ain't felt larger than anything lately. Static buzzed through the speaker like a whisper of truth. Priscilla pressed her hand to her chest, as if trying to calm her own heartbeat. Have you ever listened to someone finally admit the thing you always sensed but they never once said aloud? Elvis's voice deepened, thick with fatigue. It's getting harder, Scylla. The shows, the travel, the medicine, waking up tired, going to bed tired, trying to be what everyone needs. Even when I ain't sure who I am anymore. She felt tears gathering again. She remembered the nights when he canceled rehearsals, claiming he needed rest. She remembered the way his footsteps slowed. She remembered the way he stared at the floor sometimes, lost in a place she couldn't reach. A sudden shift in the audio made her jump. A scrape, maybe Elvis adjusting the phone, maybe his hand shaking. I know you saw pieces of it, he said. But I didn't want you to see all of it. His voice cracked on the last words. Cracked open. Raw and real. For a moment, Priscilla couldn't breathe. All the moments she tried to understand him, all the nights she wondered why he pushed her away, suddenly made a devastating kind of sense. Elvis exhaled slowly. I ain't making excuses. I wish I had told you the truth sooner. Then his tone shifted once more, this time deeper, more urgent. If anything happens to me... Priscilla's stomach dropped. Her hand flew to her lips. She already felt the tears sliding down her cheeks. Promise you'll tell Lisa I was trying. I didn't quit. I didn't give up. I was just tired. The words hit her harder than any confession so far. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were painfully simple. Painfully human. They weren't the words of a superstar. They were the words of a father terrified his daughter might one day believe the world's version of him instead of the truth. Priscilla pressed her palm to her mouth to hold back a sob. What final words do we hope our loved ones remember us by? How much does a legacy change when honesty replaces rumor? Elvis kept speaking, his voice growing weaker. I love that girl, Scylla, more than anything. I didn't always know how to show it right, but I was trying. I hope she knows that. I hope you'll help her know that. His breathing grew uneven again. Slow, shaky, fragile. Then the tape hissed loudly, swallowing seconds at a time. Priscilla leaned in, silently begging the machine to hold on. Through the static, Elvis returned with one last line. A line she had never heard before. A line that would stay with her forever. There's one more thing. The tape sputtered. The room froze. She felt the world tilt. And Elvis drew a final breath before speaking the sentence that would break her completely. The tape hissed so loudly it almost drowned him out. Then a soft click settled everything into silence. When Elvis finally spoke again, his voice was barely there, thin, trembling, worn down by years of pressure he never escaped. Scylla, I still loved you. I just never figured out how to say it the right way. Priscilla stopped breathing. The words didn't just hit her. They collapsed inside her, like a wall she had been holding up for 20 years finally gave out. Her knees weakened, and she sank to the cold concrete floor without meaning to. The answering machine sat in front of her like a sacred relic, its tiny speaker holding the one sentence she'd waited her whole life to hear, and never expected to receive. Elvis's voice on the tape wavered, as if even he wasn't sure he should have said it. I thought letting you go was best. For you. For me. For Lisa. I thought I was doing the right thing. Priscilla squeezed her eyes shut. She remembered that painful period. The separation, the distance, the polite smiles in public, the heavy silence in private. She remembered how he tried to act strong, how he hid behind jokes, behind the schedule, behind the stage. She remembered how she walked away thinking maybe he didn't love her anymore. And now, decades later, here it was. The real truth. Simple, quiet, almost whispered. I never stopped loving you, he said softly. Not for one day. The tape fluttered again, like the machine itself was trying to hold on to his fading voice. She leaned closer, afraid to miss a single sound. Her tears hit the concrete in slow, heavy drops. Have you ever heard a truth you waited years for, only to realize it came too late? What does love sound like when it arrives after the moment it could have changed everything? Elvis's tone shifted again. It wasn't the voice of a performer. It wasn't the voice of a legend. It was the voice of a man who had run out of time. I know I messed up, he whispered. I know I hurt you. I know I didn't show you the things I should have. I was scared. Scared you'd see me Fallon. Scared you'd walk away for real. Priscilla covered her mouth, trying not to cry out. She remembered the moments he hid behind sunglasses indoors, the way he would turn his back when he felt weak, the way he joked to mask pain. She had always wondered why he pushed her away when she was trying to stay close. And now, in this dim storage room, she finally had her answer. The tape buzzed again, cutting in and out, his voice dissolving into static for a moment, before returning like a fading memory clinging to the last bit of energy it had. I should have told you all this when I had the chance, he said. I should have been braver than I was. You deserved better. You always did. Her shoulders shook. She wanted to tell him she understood. She wanted to tell him she forgave him. She wanted to tell him she never stopped loving him either. But the machine couldn't hear her. And Elvis was 20 years gone. A small rattle sounded through the speakers. Maybe his ring tapping the phone. Maybe his breath catching. Then he added something that shattered her completely. I didn't send this before. 'Cause I didn't want you remembering me like this. Priscilla's entire body went still. Why didn't you send this? She thought. Why did you keep this inside? Her voice finally escaped, a whisper filling the empty room. Why didn't you send this? She repeated aloud, as if the machine might answer. Elvis spoke again one last time, soft as dust. If you're hearing this, then I guess it's time. A deep breath, a long pause. Then the tape clicked sharply. Silence. Cold, final silence. Priscilla stared at the machine, tears blurring everything, knowing that no matter how many times she replayed the message, she would never hear him finish the sentence he almost said. Priscilla stayed on the floor for a long time, unable to move. The cold concrete pressed through her clothes, but she barely felt it. All she could hear was the echo of Elvis's voice still hanging in the air, soft, broken, unfinished. The kind of voice you don't hear from someone unless they believe they're running out of time. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, but the tears kept coming. For a moment she felt 14 again. Just a girl listening to a boy sing in a living room in Germany, not knowing how deeply their lives would intertwine. And now, decades later, that same boy's voice had found her again. Through a dusty machine no one had touched in 20 years. The machine clicked softly, reminding her it was still on, still holding the last traces of him. She looked at it through blurred vision. This message wasn't just a recording. It was a bridge, a confession, a late apology, a final truth from a man who rarely allowed anyone to see his fear. She reached for the machine with trembling hands. She needed to protect it, needed to save it before anything else could happen to it. Carefully, she lifted it from the floor and unplugged the cord. The weight of the device surprised her. It felt heavier now, as if the truth inside it had real mass. Then she noticed the small slot on the side. A removable cassette. Her breath caught. She hadn't realized the message was stored on a tiny tape. Hands shaking, she pressed the eject button. The compartment slid open with a soft release. Inside was a thin, black cassette with a faded white label. No writing, no date, just a blank rectangle hiding the last voice message Elvis ever recorded. She held the cassette up to the light. The tiny reels inside glimmered faintly. Felt fragile, like it could crumble if she wasn't careful. She reached into her bag for a fresh cassette, a habit she still kept from old Graceland archiving days. She always carried one just in case. Today it felt like fate. She slid the blank tape into a small portable recorder she'd brought to document inventory, then gently copied the message over. Every second, every breath, every tremble in his voice. When it was done, she labeled the new tape with small, neat handwriting, "Dad's message, private." The word Dad made her chest tighten. Elvis wasn't just a legend. He wasn't just her former husband. He was Lisa's father. And this tape wasn't meant for the world. It wasn't meant for fans or documentaries or museums. It was meant for his daughter. She closed her eyes. She could already picture Lisa hearing it. The shock, the tears, the silence that would follow. Would this help her heal? Or would it open wounds Priscilla didn't know how to close? She ran her thumb along the label. When is the right moment to reveal something that might heal someone? Or break them? She looked back at the original cassette. Part of her wanted to destroy it, to keep its pain from ever being exploited, misunderstood, twisted. But another part of her, stronger, steadier, knew that destroying it would be like erasing a piece of Elvis that still existed in the world. So instead, she wrapped the original tape in a soft cloth, placed it gently back into the box marked Phone, 1976-77, and closed the lid with care. Then she stood up, holding the fresh cassette tightly in her hand. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about Lisa. A daughter who deserved to hear the truth her father had been too afraid to say. Priscilla turned off the light, stepped out of the storage unit, and locked the door behind her. As she walked toward her car with the tape held against her chest, she whispered to herself, "Lisa needs to hear this." But she had no idea her daughter's reaction would be nothing like what she expected. Lisa listened to the tape in complete silence. Not a breath, not a movement, just stillness. Priscilla sat across from her, hands folded tightly, afraid to interrupt even the smallest second. The room felt suspended in time, like the walls themselves were listening too. When Elvis's voice said her name, Lisa's lips parted. When he apologized, her shoulders shook. And when he said he was trying to stay strong, trying to be better, trying to be a father she could be proud of, Lisa covered her face and wept. But somewhere around the third replay, the tears changed. They softened. They shifted. They became something quieter, something gentler. She stared at the cassette in her hands as if it were a living piece of him. "I always wondered what he felt at the end," she whispered. "Now I know." The fourth time she listened, she didn't cry at all. She smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't loud or bright. It was small, fragile, and full of something she hadn't felt in years: peace. In the weeks that followed, Priscilla placed the original tape in a private Graceland archive drawer labeled 1977, Personal. Only a handful of people would ever know it existed. She wanted to protect it the way she once protected him. A biographer later asked her what Elvis would have wanted people to remember. She answered with only one sentence. He wanted to be remembered for trying. And that message, the one hidden for 20 years, became the invisible thread that stitched mother and daughter closer together. Have you ever heard a truth that didn't change the past, but changed the way you carried it? And the deeper meaning behind it all was becoming impossible to ignore. The story didn't end with the storage room, or the tape, or even the tears that came afterward. It lingered quietly, gently, in the spaces between what was said and what was never said. Because in the end, this wasn't a story about an answering machine. It was a story about unfinished words. Priscilla learned something that day that stayed with her. Truth doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it comes late, years late, but still lands exactly where it needs to. Elvis's message was proof of that. A fragile confession sent into a future he never lived to see, hoping someone he loved would finally hear it. And Lisa learned something too. She realized her father wasn't fighting to be a legend. He was fighting to be human, to be understood, to be forgiven. His voice on that tape wasn't perfect, polished, or iconic. It was real, and in its rawness, it healed something deep inside her. Love doesn't always show up when we expect it, and closure doesn't always come in grand moments. Sometimes it comes as a shaky voice on a forgotten cassette. What message from your past would you listen to today, if you had the chance? Priscilla placed the tape back in its drawer, knowing its purpose was fulfilled. And as she closed it, she whispered a quiet truth to herself. Some messages don't change the past, but they help us finally understand it. If this story touched you, share it with someone who still carries an unanswered memory. Sometimes a single message, heard at the right moment, can heal more than we realize. And if you've ever held on to a voice from your past, tell us what it meant to you.